What's happening, guys? Austin here for another Tech Talks with Tom, with Mr. Tom Anderson. Tom, thank you so much for being here, buddy. I always appreciate you taking the time to come chat with the community.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's great. It's fun chatting with you.
So I'm going to pick your brain hard on this one. So I want to talk to you about, like, anyone that's been in crypto for any amount of time has heard of, RWAs, real world assets being tokenized on chain. And I know that this is an area that's being looked at heavily. And I wanted to get kind of some feedback on your end on where do you think this is going? What does this even look like? Like, I'm pretty smooth brained when it comes to tokenization. I don't quite get the whole picture. And I wanted to see if that's something we could dive into today.
Yeah, awesome. I think tokenization is one of the biggest opportunities, not just in blockchain, but in the world in general. And I'm not the only one that thinks it. I think it's, I and a lot of others think it's on par even with artificial intelligence and the entire blockchain industry itself. I think it's going to be a renaissance in blockchain, but it's a category that starts to create that transition where blockchain grows up and starts to mold and interact and interface with, the traditional business world. So huge opportunity, $10 trillion market. And generally what tokenization means is it's, just tokenizing the world's assets. So, tokenization includes financial assets, stocks and bonds. Larry Fink for BlackRock, for example, said he thinks this is one of the biggest opportunities coming up in business. And this is the head of the world's biggest asset manager saying this, right? So his words should carry weight. Anything that he says has momentum, BlackRock's momentum behind it. He described, tokenization as the next generation for markets. He thinks all of stocks and bonds are going to be tokenized, smart contracts automating a lot of what happens. And it's, beyond just, financial assets like that, real estate, like the ways that real estate is still handled in today's modern world is just ridiculous. And it's not going to be like that for much longer. Infrastructure in general, broadly, collectibles and art, entertainment and gaming, just data broadly. And I even think human endeavor itself, the idea of what people do, their interactions, their work. A lawyer might have, tokenized representations of their effort, same with an accountant, and so it's something that's going to change the whole world. And it also, I think, is just a natural progression. It's, we all interact on our smartphones. We have the world's information at our fingertips. More and more, it's easy to transfer, cash with Venmo. We all who live in the blockchain space see how easy that is to transfer big amounts with small fees. And so a lot of this momentum of maintaining assets, on the world's computers, and letting other people interact with it is only going to grow and expand. And ultimately, it's going to be all of the world's assets are maintained on, I would say, blockchain, right? Because, you can maintain assets on a SQL database, but blockchain is a better suited data store. When you get rid of all the hype around blockchain, it's just a different type of data store. Like a SQL database is a data store. Blockchain is a different type of data store that you can just maintain assets on. It's well suited to that. So the world's assets are going to become digitized and they're going to be held on blockchain. So it's a huge upcoming category.
So I have some leading questions on this one to try and get you to something. No, that was actually perfect. And I'm going to reveal here how little I know about this. But so let's take real estate, for example, like ownership of a home. The other day I don't know why I was awake at 1 a.m, but apparently I was. And this commercial comes on and it says, it was basically about trying to get you to buy home title insurance because somebody could potentially go to the county that you live in and transfer the title to their name. And it was very compelling, right? I was like, oh, damn, I need, is somebody going to do that to me now, right? And so, but, when I researched it, it wasn't as big of a deal as they made it out to be. However, if my home title, like the ownership of my home was actually tokenized and my wallet was compromised, right? This is where my head goes with this. Would the ownership of my home be compromised along with that if it was done on a chain not like DevvE, like maybe on Ethereum or something like that? Is that kind of the way that this is going, or am I looking at this totally wrong?
Well, okay, so that's a great question, and you kind of hit on two important parts. One is the fact that there's title insurance, like it just shows the reason that exists at all is just the inefficiencies in the system. I bought some property up in the mountains and literally had like 100-year-old scans of 100-year-old documents that were part of the closing package, in like weird fonts and like words and writing that, and it's just like the baggage that has kind of tracked with the land over time has just kept this archaic form. And it's like, really? Like, this is how we do things? No wonder it takes 3 weeks to get some tiny, government person in that small place because you're buying land up in the mountains, to do anything. It takes forever. And then you have the ongoing forever questions of like, is it really, did everything get properly recorded? And is that going to cause problems? Right. And so that's why you get, insurance on those types of things. And so the system right now is ridiculous. Like they're like in today's modern age, really that's how we do it, and so that's one big concept. Like that's not going to last forever. And more, especially with blockchain technology, and especially with blockchain technology becoming more mainstream, which is where it's headed. You're gonna reach an impetus where it tips, and governments are gonna say this is how things need to be done, and there'll be some cleanup time period. It'll take time to transition, but in the scheme of things, it's gonna be pretty quick. It's gonna be decades of doing it a certain way, and then years of cleanup, and then from then on, everything is much more efficient. Okay, so then once you have things digitally tracked, then you run into other challenges, like theft and so you'll have, checks and balances in these types of systems, but the checks and balances will all be immediate and automated. So, again, part of what we did at DevvE is we said, how are these types of things going to work in the real world from the beginning? You need fraud, that's loss protections. You need privacy protections, and blockchain typically doesn't have solutions to those types of things as it's been implemented for the most part, over the past decade. And so we when we were in 2015, 2016, we were looking forward to, these types of issues coming up and started creating solutions on them. Larry Fink described, tokenization is going to be the future of, financial instruments. And so I saw an interview he was doing, and somebody asked him, well, what about, privacy? How are you going to manage that? And he didn't have an answer. Like his answer was, well, we're looking into, right, zero knowledge proofs and things like that. But the fact that one of the most important things you have to have in hand to implement that in the real world, he answered as we're looking into, means they haven't solved it yet. But DevvE 6 years ago came up with a privacy solution that solves the problems that real world businesses have to have solved to actually implement these things. And same as your question, what if your system gets locked? Does that mean you lose your system gets hacked? Does that mean you lose your house? No. Protections will be in place to do it, but you have to have the technology, that you can implement those protections. So just finishing out the privacy solution, we, 7 years ago, we came up with a privacy solution. Basically, it's a third-party intermediary that you can use or not. But if you use that third-party intermediary, then they can run things through and you can even use it, zero knowledge proofs or whatever. But you have an intermediary that manages privacy. And the reason you need an intermediary is because governments don't allow true privacy. Governments don't allow privacy that you can't audit when you think there's money laundering or terrorism, right? And so if you don't work within regulatory requirements, the technology ultimately is going to be squashed by governments. Real world assets aren't going to be able to be put on it. So we created this system of an intermediary that maintains privacy, and then the government can come to that intermediary and say, I want to know about these transactions, and then the intermediary is going to say no, and then they're going to say, well, here's a subpoena, and then they're going to say, okay, here's the information you need, just like all businesses run, right? And then just like Google runs. If Google gets a subpoena, it provides information, right? And so there's tricks about the technical implementation of that. We submitted patents on it. And this is to me one of the best examples of kind of where we stand out in our thought processes of moving towards these real world, kind of implementations. We submitted a PCT filing, an international patent filing, and we got back the search results and it said no prior art. And that never happens with patents, never. In those early days, people even kind of scoffed at having patents at all. because this was at the very earliest cypherpunk, down with government, anti-establishment. You don't submit, and it kind of makes sense with Bitcoin. Like, who are you going to sue if Bitcoin infringes, right? There's nobody to sue. It's a decentralized governance system. But when real world businesses start using that, and then they have to follow government's rules, the governments are going to say you can't do these things unless you're following the laws. And so you need a system that they're running on that follows the laws. And then you're in a domain where patents actually can be effective, because there is going to be somebody to sue if they infringe on the patents. So we submitted those privacy patents. They've now issued globally. And I think they're blocking level patents because, at the time, no prior art came in, and we were one of the first, to recognize this is going to be a huge category.
Well, the way that you describe it, and for anyone that might hear that and be confused, I mean, it sounds to me like exactly what domains by proxy does for GoDaddy, right? If you buy a domain and you don't want everyone to spam you to hell, they put their information there. Or your bank does this pretty much by default. Nobody can see your debit card transactions, but if somebody shows up with a subpoena and it's legit, they're going to let that out. And so I understand that, and that is beautifully put. And so when it comes to tokenization, and we're talking about, really what we're talking about is a record of ownership. Am I accurate in saying that? Like, if you're tokenizing art, you want to hang the art in your office, or you want to hang the art in your home, or you want the actual picture itself for the most part, as opposed to maybe an NFT if we're going down that route, but a JPEG. But we're talking about a record of ownership here when we talk about tokenization.
Yep. Yeah. So
Excellent.
So tokenization can, again, apply to any type of asset. So it can be digital assets themselves, where they're digital in nature, like music or videos or movies, things like that. They can be digital representations of real world assets, of physical assets. So land titles or car titles. Car titles is another one. It's like, I have a friend that bought a car, and the dude that was selling it to him didn't have the title. And there's like legal things you can go through and figure it out, but then you wonder, like, did this guy really own the car? That kind of thing. And so having everything, like having a master record where all the ownership is really owned and determined. Nothing when you sign a car title, if you sign it not quite right, or there's a little bit of a mark on it, like there's just it's just such an archaic way of implementing things. Just it's not a good way to do stuff. And the world's assets will move into the modern, kind of philosophies around computing, and it's going to be a huge opportunity. You can also, again, tokenize even human endeavor, right? You can have people's efforts, and then the use and ownership around those efforts, or the monetization around those efforts, can be tokenized. So it's a digital representation of anything that people can associate value with, I think is the broadest way to look at it.
And so if we're sitting on a $10 trillion industry, is it 10 trillion now or 10 trillion in the future, like by 2030 or something? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think I'd have to look at the source, but I think the exact date, but it was 1020 in a few years. But not 1020, not 10 trillion in, it's less than a decade. The report that I read, it was $10 trillion, I think, in 5 to 6 years,
Well, I mean, regardless, that is roughly 7 times the entire crypto market cap currently. So I would say that's a fairly significant number. And so my question to you, and I have some ideas, but obviously you're going to be more of an authority on this, is how is DevvE and DevvX much more perfectly positioned and suited to serve this particular type of industry as opposed to almost anything else on the market?
This actually, I think, was kind of funny. So you have the things that the blockchain space gets excited about over time, right? So there's DeFi. Everybody's like, oh, there's DeFi, right? Then there's GameFi. And then right now, one of the big things over the past few months was meme tokens, right? And there were meme tokens in the past, but all of a sudden they got a new level of steam. And within the past probably 6 months, I had people start coming and saying, like, oh, do you do real world assets? Like, man, if you guys could do real world assets, then that'd be awesome, And it's like, real world assets means enterprise blockchain. Like we're
Right.
we're the only blockchain that's been doing real world assets the whole time, right? We're the only blockchain that designed for real world assets from the beginning. So all of a sudden you have this category that starts to get exciting, and everyone's like, "Wow!" And people don't understand why they're like so excited about it, but they're excited about it because the Larry Finks and the BlackRocks of the world are now seeing a maturity in the space that they can that the breadcrumbs are close enough that you could start to see these assets actually being tokenized, and you could get rid of all the problems you have with transfer agents and stocks, or title insurance with land ownership, like we talked about, that kind of thing. And so yeah, we've been doing real world assets and design for our system from the beginning. When you have real world assets, again, that's enterprise scale applications, enterprise level customers, corporate level customers, tokenizing assets that businesses and users use. It's large scale, and you have to have the protections that real world business relies on. And so, again, from the beginning, and unlike in other blockchains, we design for fraud, theft, and loss protections. You don't want to have your private key get hacked and somebody now owns your house legally. You can't have that, right? So you need fraud, theft, and loss protections. You can't have when somebody dies and their estate, has, you just literally cannot have a system that operates this way. You can't have where someone dies and their estate, has heirs, and there's no way to get, proof of access, to the heirs. Like you can't have that type of system. It just, people won't move to it. So you need fraud, theft, and loss protections. You need privacy solutions. You can't have real world businesses who are doing their own trades, and they have their own bank account information and their own asset information. And public companies report what they have to report, but there's still a lot of privacy when you're operating a real business. So you can't have big companies won't use it if they have to put information out there that people can decipher or figure out by interpreting the blockchain. You have to have actual privacy. And we can implement that through our sharding solution. We can implement it through our privacy solution on a particular shard. And then you also need high speed, high throughput, cost effectiveness. All of the things that we've designed for are the things that you need in tokenization. And then I would finally put an exclamation mark on it. The most important thing is the architectural flexibility. You can't have these behemoth, one solution fits all blockchains, managing assets across all of the regulatory, jurisdictions out there, all of the different geographic, jurisdictions, the country borders, the rules around how assets are maintained and transferred and owned and, prevented from being stolen. You cannot implement a solution that manages tokenized assets in a way that you don't have the architectural flexibility that we have. So all of the things that are deal killers, for this $10 trillion opportunity, we've had a solution on and have patented a lot of these concepts for 7-8 years. There's no other blockchain that even comes close to being able to manage all of the intricacies needed for mass scale tokenization.
And so just to kind of round this out, because I would imagine this is on people's minds because this is on my mind. When you had mentioned, okay, so privacy, non-negotiable, right? Must be had, but had in a way that works with governments. Fraud, theft, and loss, non-negotiable, because my dad is not going to tokenize an asset if he thinks somebody can come in and steal it from him. And being that you have solved these issues and the blocking level patents, what does that actually mean, that blocking level patent? Like if somebody says, okay, well, we want to jump into this industry and here's a quote unquote privacy solution that we've come up with, how does that work in the real world, being that you have the blocking level patent?
Yeah, so patents are kind of a tricky game. I've had actually a lot of experience with patents, both with submitting them and getting them issued, and then even looking at enforcing them. And it's a game is I think the right way to describe it. So patents have their place in business. I think they have value, but they also, there's trade-offs when you're trying to enforce it. There's games people play on how to invalidate it, how to try to show there's prior art, there's risk on those types of things. There's Section 101 issues, right? That you always have to, be able to address, any types of, practical use. And again, prior art, like I said, that those types of things come up, and you argue that, what we did doesn't apply to that, and then the other side argues that, right? So that's all one big game. It's just one aspect of what we're doing. I think the biggest thing in kind of driving the business forward is really finding the right partnerships. So again, you have Larry Fink, who gets on an interview and somebody asks him, well, how do you handle privacy? Which is a really good question. And he says, well, we're looking at this, right? That means he doesn't have a solution right now. And so what you have now is big companies seeing a big opportunity, seeing the efficiencies, seeing the reductions in FTEs, full-time employees, seeing just all of the financial aspects of how you can utilize this technology in big ways, and where you can also manage and collect fees on, transfers of assets and things like that. Like it's big business, there's huge opportunities here. So these big companies that are wanting to get into it, and they're running into the problems that existing blockchains don't solve. And so then you start to, are we going to build our own homegrown solution or with some other company? And they're going to find out these are hard problems. Like, this isn't stuff that you just flip a switch and get it turned on overnight. And, DevvE, in contrast, has been working on this for years, working on implementing and automating, hardening, making all of this ultimately is built on a foundation of security as well, right? Which is another just very difficult design criteria when you're trying to implement these things. So I think all these big companies are going to be running into problems that we've solved. We need to now find those companies, partner with them, license to them, implement it, and start deploying it. And then you also have, in general, I'll mention this comment before I say it, that I'm not involved directly with the token side of things. But I do think there's some exciting things going on with the Forever Association and what they're doing with tokens that fit in. So if you start to tokenize all of the world's assets, and you have the best technology to do that, and then you have a token, DevvE, that really fundamentally lets people transfer value, then DevvE can become, the token that represents the ability to transfer that value, all of these different types of assets. So it fits well with what, DevvE is doing in partnership with Forever as well. And so now we just got to go out and execute and find these partners and start growing, and also find our beachheads. Amazon started with books, and I actually met Jeff Bezos in the early days, but while he was just doing books. This actually was kind of an interesting story. He was doing a talk at a class I was at, and he said, "Oh man, the best way to buy books now is digital books, and man, this is a great way to buy digital books. And it's awesome to do this when you buy digital books, right?" And he just had these blinders on, like talking about digital books. And my teacher said, "Oh, that's great." And it was an entrepreneurial class. "That's great. Could you explain to the class what it's like to be an entrepreneur?" And he's like, "Being an entrepreneur is great, but you know what's even better? Selling digital books," right? And he just started like talking about, books again. Man, he was just so focused on that one thing. And I took that lesson with me kind of through my career. He really succeeded in one area, established it, really truly made a beachhead, and expanded into other areas. So I think part of what we need to do is similar, find a particular beachhead, have that really proven out and show how it can grow, and then expand into other areas. But man, the opportunity here and the way our blockchain works, the way we solve problems that others don't, the sky is the limit. So
absolutely incredible. Tom, thank you so much for being here. What a wonderful show. Thank you for tuning in, guys. My name is Austin with DevvE, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.